What if I told you that royal palaces, the glittering symbols of civilization, power, and elegance, were filthier than a modern public restroom, reeking of unwashed flesh, rotting teeth, and human waste seeping through golden walls? You step through gilded doors into the most magnificent palace in all of Christendom, the kind that populates every royal documentary and feeds the fantasies of Disney princess movies, your mind spinning with visions of royal splendor and secrets of royalty. The marble floors beneath your feet gleam like mirrors, reflecting the flickering flames of 1,000 candles, casting royal hygiene shadows across priceless tapestries imported from distant empires, each thread a silent witness to centuries of hidden royal court secrets. The soft rustle of silk gowns brushes past you like whispers in the dark, promising tales of unimaginable power and medieval beauty, secrets gone wrong, as jeweled fingers graze surfaces worth more than entire kingdoms, dripping with pearls and rubies that glint like blood in the candlelight. You breathe deeply, eager to taste the perfumed air, to drink in the intoxicating scent of power and elegance, and then it hits you an invisible wall of stench, so sharp, so relentless, it almost makes your eyes water. Because lurking behind the dazzling facade of royal palaces, beneath layers of luxury and royal court protocol, lies a biological nightmare of lice-infested wigs, lead-laced makeup, slowly killing queens from the inside out, and corridors soaked in the stench of human waste, a hidden reality that no romantic period drama or glamorous royal documentary dares to show. This isn't merely history. This is the grotesque, revolting truth of royal hygiene. Medieval hygiene rituals and historical beauty secrets gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. Are you ready to discover why Versailles smelled worse than a slaughterhouse? Why the Queen of England bathed so rarely that her skin peeled off in chunks, soaked in toxic cosmetics that rotted her teeth and left her breath capable of felling a horse? Welcome to the real royal court, where power was absolute, but soap was optional, and where every glittering jewel was stained with the dark, putrid secrets of human suffering and a stench so overpowering it threatened to topple empires from within. Imagine standing in the heart of Queen Elizabeth III's palace in 1580, thinking the air would be sweet with roses and power, only to discover that royal hygiene was a medieval horror story beyond your darkest nightmares. Because here's the brutal truth. The most powerful woman on earth, draped in silks and commanding armies, bathed only once a month, a ritual so rare and feared that even royal servants prayed not to be assigned to it. In the world of medieval hygiene and historical beauty, secrets gone wrong, water was viewed with suspicion, and each drop felt like a dangerous gamble with death. Picture 20. Exhausted servants hauling boiling water bucket after bucket, preparing a wooden tub that sat like a medieval torture device, its linen linings meant to protect royal skin from splinters. But the real horror lay in what dissolved into that water, the deadly layers of Venetian ceruse, a lead-based cosmetic painted on day after day, turning Elizabeth's skin into cracked, poisonous clay. The moment the Queen stepped into her monthly bath, the water transformed into a swirling stew of lead sweat, old perfume and grime so foul it could drop a grown man where he stood. Can you even fathom the metallic tang rising from that tub, mingling with the scent of rotting flesh beneath layers of white paint? And yet this was just the beginning of how royal beauty routines turned queens into walking victims of toxic fashion. Because the lead didn't just stay on their faces, it seeped into bloodstreams, rotted teeth, and set the stage for tempers and memory lapses that historians once blamed on the burdens of ruling, never suspecting the true poison lurking beneath pale perfection. But that was only the start of this royal hygiene nightmare, because what happened outside the bath and how the Queen masked her decaying beauty each day would push the boundaries of disgusting history even further. Picture yourself slipping past heavy velvet curtains into the private chambers of Queen Elizabeth III, hoping to glimpse the secrets of royalty and perhaps catch a whiff of lavender and roses. Instead, you're hit by a thick metallic tang hanging in the royal air, a scent equal parts vinegar sweat, and something far darker. Because the closer you move toward the throne of power, the more you realize that royal hygiene in the Elizabethan age wasn't just primitive. It was a living nightmare of medieval beauty, secrets gone terribly catastrophically wrong. Welcome to the private hell of the lead face paint nightmare, a story buried beneath jewels and silk waiting centuries to discuss the modern world and explode across viral history channels everywhere. Imagine waking up each morning knowing your first duty as a lady-in-waiting is not to dress the queen in shimmering gowns, but to help rebuild the mask that hides her decaying flesh. The queen ruler of an empire that stretches its influence across continents emerges from sleep, with her face cracked and peeling each fragment, a silent testament to a royal hygiene disaster. Venetian ceruse, a deadly concoction of white lead vinegar and water, coats Elizabeth's skin like porcelain armor. Except this armor is a slow-acting toxin, a silent killer that seeps into the bloodstream, with each passing day slowly transforming the queen into a fragile monument to vanity and power. Yet in a world obsessed with pale perfection, this lethal white paint becomes as essential to ruling as armies and gold. And here's the twisted irony that only history can deliver: the very cosmetic that gave Elizabeth Warren her ghostly allure was the same poison that stole her memory, ravaged her skin, and shattered her sanity. Court physicians of the time might have whispered warnings about the dangers of lead, but how do you convince a queen, a woman elevated nearly to divine status, that her royal beauty secret is eating her alive from the inside out? Lead poisoning caused Elizabeth's skin to gray and pucker, requiring thicker and thicker layers of paint to conceal the damage, a vicious cycle of decay and disguise that no amount of perfume could mask. Her courtiers noticed that the queen grew increasingly volatile, prone to bursts of rage, trembling fits of paranoia, and sudden lapses in memory that left her speechless mid-sentence. Historians once blamed these symptoms on the crushing pressures of ruling, but now we know better. We know it was the poison she wore on her face day after day for decades. Imagine leaning in close enough to whisper state secrets to the queen, only to be assaulted by the suffocating smell of lead mixed with rancid oils trapped under layers of dried cosmetic crust. Venetian ceruse didn't just stay on the surface, it wormed its way into Elizabeth's gums, rotting her teeth until her breath grew so foul that even seasoned diplomats learned to keep a precise distance. Imagine having to conduct high-level political negotiations, maneuvering not only through the labyrinth of court intrigue, but through the lethal cloud of metallic stench emanating from your sovereign's lips. That, my friends, is the hidden reality behind the elegant portraits that hang in museums, the truth that even the most glamorous royal documentaries gloss over. This is the disgusting history lurking beneath the fairy tale. And here's what makes this story so perfect for viral videos and secrets of royalty: exposes the fact that Venetian ceruse wasn't unique to Elizabeth. Queens and noblewomen across Europe followed the same deadly routine, desperate to achieve that alabaster skin so prized in royal court protocol. Every layer they painted on was another step closer to madness, decay, and death. Yet they continued addicted to the fleeting illusion of beauty and power that white lead promised. Because pale skin wasn't just a fashion statement, it was a symbol of class, a declaration that you were untouched by the sun, the fields, and the sweat of labor. It was in essence proof that you belonged to a world apart, the glittering, festering world of secrets of royalty. Imagine court ladies staring at their own reflections each morning, watching their skin become thinner, grayer, and more brittle, yet still reaching for the brush to paint another coat of poison over yesterday's layer. Imagine the psychological torment of feeling your mind slip away piece by piece, even as you must maintain perfect composure, reciting names of ambassadors, discussing royal alliances, and deciding the fate of nations. This was a world where power and suffering went hand in hand, where queens sat on thrones draped in ermine and gold while enduring a private hell that would break lesser mortals. And it wasn't just Elizabeth. Historical records whisper about Marie Antoinette, transforming her bath into a theatrical spectacle, sitting clothed in full-length linen while courtiers gathered to watch, all while she nibbled on delicate pastries. The water around her churned with white flakes, lead residue sweat, and the bitter tang of vinegar from her cosmetic arsenal. Can you picture the Queen of France soaking in a pool of her own toxic beauty secrets, while nobles politely discussed state business, pretending not to notice the gray sludge swirling around her royal limbs? It's almost unimaginable, and yet it's the very heart of royal hygiene nightmares. The reason videos about disgusting history and medieval hygiene consistently go viral, because deep down, we're all obsessed with what happens behind the velvet curtains of power. We're all dying to know how something so beautiful on the outside could be so horrific beneath the surface. And the psychological weight these women carried was staggering. Imagine standing beneath golden chandeliers making life and death decisions while your scalp itches from toxic oils and dead skin accumulates in ghostly drifts beneath your hairpieces. Imagine trying to maintain a regal smile while your teeth loosen in your gums, your breath curdling the air and a hidden panic claws at the edges of your mind. How many queens and noble women ruled empires while battling a relentless inner collapse fueled by their own beauty routines? And how many of them understood deep down that their royal court secrets were also their death warrants? This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a collective nightmare that swept through every European court. It was a culture of slow-motion suicide disguised as royal elegance, a biological horror show playing out beneath powdered wigs and glimmering jewels. The queens of history weren't simply victims of vanity. They were prisoners of an impossible standard, driven to literal madness and decay in their pursuit of perfection. And it's precisely this clash between outward glamour and hidden decay that makes royal hygiene one of the most fascinating and horrifying chapters in all of disgusting history. So the next time you look at a portrait of Elizabeth, I remember this. That serene, pale face staring back at you isn't just an icon of royal power. It's a mask of poison, hiding a woman slowly dying behind a wall of white lead. And while her empire stretched across oceans, the real battlefield lay just beneath her skin. But even this nightmare was only a piece of the grotesque puzzle, because the horrors lurking in the royal hair rituals and the crawling terror of lice were waiting in the shadows, eager to take center stage in this relentless royal hygiene saga. Step closer into the shadowed corridors of the royal palaces and brace yourself for a reality so vile it makes the deadly white face paint seem almost merciful by comparison. Because beneath velvet robes and silk gowns, the true plague lurking in the world of royal hygiene was alive, crawling, and hungry for blood lice. Yes, lice, the tiny invaders that turned the towering courts of kings and queens into festering breeding grounds of crawling horror. Imagine standing in the presence of King James I of England, a monarch so powerful he ruled nations and dictated the fates of empires, yet whose very chambers were so infested that noble visitors left his presence scratching themselves raw. The records of royal court secrets don't lie. Lady Anne Clifford herself wrote about how a single visit to the king's chamber left her and her entire family lousy, the polite 17th century way of saying they'd become human buffets for countless parasites. It's one thing to imagine lice scuttling through the hair of a beggar on a filthy London street. But to know that royalty men and women adorned in gold pearls and ermine were forced to endure the constant maddening crawl of lice beneath layers of powdered wigs and hairpieces. That's the kind of disgusting history that explodes across YouTube because it tears down every fairy tale about the supposedly divine pristine elegance of royal life. And here's the unspeakable truth that makes this a perfect story for viral videos obsessed with secrets of royalty. Lice weren't just a minor annoyance. They were a relentless army capable of turning the most magnificent court into a living biological nightmare. Picture King James. I'm refusing to bathe for months on end, his body encased in layers of unwashed clothing, his hat rarely leaving his head until it quite literally disintegrated from filth. These garments didn't just absorb the king's sweat, they became entire ecosystems where lice multiplied, thrived, and poured forth like swarms from a rotten hive. Sit on the same chair as the king, brush up against his cloak, share the same perfumed air, and you too became part of the royal lice infestation. Historians and modern researchers have pieced together chilling facts. These lice weren't harmless. They were lethal vectors for typhus, a disease so deadly it killed more soldiers than any battlefield ever could. In an era when hygiene was viewed with suspicion and water feared as a possible source of sickness, Lice were the invisible assassins that stalked the gilded halls of power. Imagine you're a nobleman, summoned for a private audience with the king. You've spent hours preparing your appearance, your silken garments pressed and powdered, your hair sculpted into elaborate waves with ox fat and floral oils. You step into the royal chamber expecting to discuss matters of state, perhaps to secure royal favor for your lands or your family's future. But within minutes you feel a faint tickle at the back of your neck. Then another. Soon a swarm of invisible creatures scuttles across your scalp, burrowing into your hairline, creeping toward your ears. You can't flinch, can't scratch, because royal court protocol demands perfect composure. Instead, you force yourself to stand there, hands clasped, fighting back the primal urge to rip your clothes off and claw at your own flesh. That, my friends, is the true face of medieval hygiene and disgusting history, the secret reality lurking beneath the regal splendor painted in history books and royal documentaries. And the horror didn't stop with kings and courtiers. The elaborate hairstyles worn by royal women, towering constructions held together with animal fats and dusted with powders, became five-star hotels for lice colonies. These hairpieces weren't just fashion statements, they were biological ecosystems. Fleas and lice laid eggs in the thick grease, finding perfect warmth and moisture. Dead insects accumulated in layers trapped in the dense mass of powdered hair, decomposing into a nauseating sludge that mixed with sweat and perfume. Women carried elegant ivory sticks ornately carved and inlaid with jewels, but these weren't simply decorative accessories. They were tools for scratching deep inside their towering coiffures without disrupting the carefully sculpted architecture. Can you imagine enduring diplomatic negotiations while your scalp felt like it was on fire from crawling parasites, knowing that even a single scratch might reveal your secret infestation? And still, the show had to go on. Royal ceremonies demanded perfect posture, graceful gestures, and the illusion of divine authority. Picture a grand audience hall glittering with chandeliers filled with silk and jewels, as a queen smiles serenely upon her subjects, all the while fighting the urge to dig her fingers into her scalp and tear out the parasites feasting on her blood. Court etiquette adapted to accommodate the constant presence of lice. Historians document how nobles developed protocols for standing, bowing, and even moving through corridors to minimize contact and prevent further spread. Whispered conversations were punctuated by discreet flicks of fingers through hairlines, each gesture a silent acknowledgement of the shared torment everyone was pretending didn't exist. And this silent collective denial wasn't just a quirk of the times, it was a deadly gamble with disease and death. Typhus swept through palaces, leaving a trail of corpses in its wake. Every handshake, every bow, every soft brush of silk against velvet was a possible death sentence. It's a gruesome reality that YouTube's audience devours because it reveals the hypocrisy of royal life. The same people who wielded absolute power were helpless against creatures smaller than a grain of sand. And the psychological cost was staggering. The constant itching drove men and women nearly insane. Diplomats, generals, queens, all forced to maintain regal dignity, while invisible armies waged war beneath their clothes. Royal chambers, once symbols of power, transformed into crawling hives where disease simmered just beneath the surface. So the next time you gaze at portraits of kings in their plumed hats and queens with towering powdered hair, remember this: behind every elegant pose and jeweled crown lay an unending battle against lice filth and the creeping terror of disease. Royal hygiene wasn't just poor, it was catastrophic. It was the hidden truth behind the velvet curtains of power, the reason secrets of royalty remain some of the most irresistible topics in disgusting history. And as horrific as this lice epidemic was, it was merely one chapter in the grim saga of royal hygiene nightmares, because beyond the crawling parasites, another weapon waited in the royal arsenal: the overwhelming, intoxicating, and sometimes lethal world of perfume, a chemical shield deployed to fight the stench of 1,000 unwashed bodies. And that's exactly where our story heads next. Step inside the corridors of Versailles or the royal chambers of England, and brace yourself for the next layer of the royal hygiene nightmare, a realm where every breath was a battle and the air itself could suffocate you. Because after lice and lead-laced makeup, the third weapon in this arsenal of medieval beauty secrets gone horribly wrong was perfume, and not the delicate floral mist you'd imagine drifting through scenes of silk and diamonds. No, this was chemical warfare waged against the relentless stench of rotting flesh, infected wounds, unwashed bodies, and the collective human waste of thousands. Royal hygiene was less about cleanliness and more about how to outstink the stink. And it's precisely this grotesque contrast between elegance and decay that makes Secrets of Royalty some of the most irresistible viral content on YouTube. People think palaces smelled of roses. The truth is, they smelled like public toilets drowning in musk and rotting ambergris. Imagine you're one of over 10,000 souls squeezed into the golden halls of Versailles, each person sweating beneath layers of velvet and brocade every breath, tasting faintly of urine and rancid flesh. The Sun King. Louis XIV may have wanted to create the pinnacle of royal court protocol and beauty, but he also inadvertently built a gilded cesspool. In a palace where women lifted their skirts to urinate in corners, and men relieved themselves off balconies into courtyards below, the sheer magnitude of filth defied belief. And yet, even as sewage soaked the carpets and human waste sloshed through corridors, the court's response wasn't to clean it up, it was to mask it with ever more potent fragrances. Because in royal hygiene, the solution to filth was not water but perfume, strong enough to blister your sinuses. And here's where the story slides deeper into the territory of disgusting history. The nobles of Versailles and royal courts across Europe began carrying little sachets of scented powders, perfumed gloves, and fans soaked in oils so pungent they could be smelled across entire rooms. These weren't accessories of luxury, they were weapons of survival. Queens and ladies of the court pressed perfumed cloths to their nostrils, desperate to avoid fainting as rivers of human waste flowed beneath them. Yet even these olfactory shields often failed. Imagine sweet rose oil mixed with the acrid tang of ammonia, or the sharp bite of vinegar battling the heavy musk of unwashed flesh. The result wasn't a pleasant bouquet, it was a sickly cocktail that punched your senses like a fist. And it wasn't just personal scent battles. Perfume in royal courts became political strategy, a way to signal alliances and declare social status. Certain fragrances hinted at availability for romantic affairs, while others broadcast loyalty to powerful factions. The stronger and more expensive your perfume, the higher your perceived rank. In the ruthless world of Secrets of Royalty, even your smell was part of your armor. Imagine being pushed to the margins of court gatherings simply because your scent wasn't potent enough to mask the royal stench. To be less perfumed was to be less noble, a detail YouTube's audience devours because it exposes how even invisible things like scent determined life or death in the royal game. Yet all this olfactory theater couldn't mask the harsh truth. Perfume didn't erase the filth. It only mingled with it, creating new horrors. Think about ambergris, a prized perfume ingredient harvested from the intestines of sperm whales. It gave fragrances a rich, sensual depth, but in the heated air of Versailles, it blended with sweat and mildew until the palace smelled like sweet decay. Or civet musk extracted from glands near the anus of a small mammal, which nobles rubbed into gloves and hair pomades. Imagine shaking hands with a duke only to carry away the intimate scent of animal musk clinging to your skin. Is it any wonder viewers flocked to channels revealing disgusting history when even courtly handshakes became an exercise in filth management? Perfume wasn't merely cosmetic, it was psychological armor. Royals lived in constant terror that the stink clinging to them would reveal secrets better left hidden, infections festering beneath elaborate gowns, suppurating wounds hidden under silk bandages, or the relentless rot of teeth blackened by lead cosmetics. The courtiers became paranoid, dousing themselves in layer upon layer of scent until the very air shimmered with invisible clouds of chemical warfare. Yet no matter how hard they tried, the reality always leaked through. The human nose is too perceptive, too unforgiving to be fooled for long. And so the nobles of Europe existed in a perpetual state of denial, pretending they were surrounded by fields of flowers while living in what was effectively a golden sewer. And if you think that's the end of this royal hygiene horror, think again. Because the true tragedy was that these potent fragrances were not merely a cover for physical filth, but also for moral decay. Under the pretense of divine right and elegance, the royals participated in acts of shocking cruelty, reckless indulgence, and unimaginable suffering. And perfume became the perfect metaphor for it all, a dazzling mask hiding putrefaction beneath. Next time you see a film showing Versailles glittering under chandeliers, remember that its marble halls echoed with the soft splash of waste, and every flick of a perfumed fan was a desperate bid to keep from vomiting. That's the raw, hidden truth behind royal court secrets. The kind of vile reality that hooks millions of views because it rips the curtain off fairy tales and shows the crawling, stinking machinery underneath. But even the perfume mask couldn't save the royals from the most intimate and degrading reality of power, a reality that involved not only foul smells, but the handling of royal waste itself, a duty so unthinkable yet so politically powerful that it could make or break entire careers. And that, my friends, leads us straight into the unimaginable world of the groom of the stool, where loyalty politics and human excrement collided in the most shocking chapter of royal hygiene yet. Let me take you now into the innermost sanctum of royal life, a place so intimate, so taboo, that even seasoned courtiers whispered about it only behind tightly closed doors. Because beyond the clouds of perfume, beyond the rustling silks and glittering jewels, there lay a truth about royal hygiene so shocking, so disgustingly human, that it tears the divine illusion of monarchy into bloody, filthy shreds. This is the world of the groom of the stool, the royal official, whose entire career revolved around one revolting yet politically explosive task, managing the king's most private bodily functions. And if you thought secrets of royalty began and ended with lice or poisonous makeup, think again. Because this story belongs at the pinnacle of disgusting history, where human waste became currency, and where the man who held the royal wipecloth wielded more power than generals or bishops. Imagine for a moment being chosen for this honor. To modern minds, it sounds like the lowest humiliation imaginable. Yet in the vicious ecosystem of royal court secrets, the groom of the stool was a post of staggering political influence. This man didn't merely stand by with towels and linen while the king relieved himself. He physically wiped the monarch's unwashed backside, monitored his excretions, and managed the royal portable toilet, the close stool which traveled with the king wherever he went. In a time when royal hygiene was a horror show of unwashed flesh, festering wounds, and foul odors, this role plunged its holder into a sensory nightmare. Yet paradoxically, it also elevated him into the king's inner circle, giving him proximity and access that noblemen would have sold their souls to achieve. Think of the psychological paradox. Here you were, a nobleman of high birth, kneeling behind your sovereign cloth, in hand preparing to clean the remnants of royal digestion from a posterior that might not have seen soap in months. You inhaled the mingled scents of human waste, rancid sweat, rotting flesh, and stale perfume, all while maintaining the solemn dignity demanded by royal court protocol. You were forbidden to show disgust no matter how violently your stomach churned or how your eyes watered. And yet, despite the filth, you became one of the most trusted men in the kingdom. Because in that humiliating position, you saw the king at his most vulnerable, and nothing breeds political power like vulnerability. The groom of the stool became confident advisor and sometimes even policy influencer, all because he occupied a place no one else dared. Picture the king grunting through a difficult bowel movement, sweat trickling down his temple while discussing foreign alliances, military campaigns, or succession plans. Treaties were negotiated, death warrants signed, and secrets shared while one man knelt behind the throne cloth ready. That, my friends, is the brutal, unvarnished reality of royal hygiene, a secret of royalty so jaw-dropping it practically screams to go viral on YouTube because it obliterates every romantic notion of kings as untouchable demigods. And it didn't stop there. The groom of the stool was tasked with maintaining records of the king's digestion, his bowel movements, the color consistency, frequency, all meticulously noted, because in the world of medieval hygiene and royal health, feces were considered a vital window into a ruler's state of being. Imagine flipping through a royal ledger only to read entries like, "His Majesty passed a soft stool of pale color accompanied by distress." This wasn't gossip. It was political intelligence. A king suffering chronic diarrhea might be too weak to lead troops or negotiate with foreign ambassadors. A constipated monarch might be irritable, prone to rage, or incapable of sitting through crucial meetings. In a court rife with intrigue, knowledge of such bodily secrets was a weapon of immense power. Families vied to place their sons in this role, understanding that proximity to the royal backside meant proximity to the throne itself. The groom's word carried weight in deciding who saw the king and who didn't, whose petitions were granted and whose fell into oblivion. He could whisper in the king's ear during moments when no other man was permitted near. In effect, he became the ultimate gatekeeper, the man who determined which nobles rose or fell, and he held the king's life in his hands in more ways than one. If the groom noticed blood, pus, or an abnormal stench, he might be the first to diagnose royal illness information that could topple dynasties if it fell into the wrong ears. But spare a thought for the human toll. Imagine waking up each day knowing you'd spend your hours in a chamber swirling with odors so foul that even Versailles at its worst might seem like a fresh spring meadow. Imagine the psychological scars of existing in that paradox, simultaneously reviled for your filthy task and envied for your political access. And imagine the king himself forced to expose the most private and humiliating parts of his existence to a man who in another context might be expected to bow and scrape from a respectful distance. That daily collision between divine right and raw humanity reveals the deepest truth about royal court secrets, that the throne may be gilded, but the body upon it is just flesh and blood, frail and foul like anyone else's. And so as you watch grand historical dramas filled with glittering crowns and heroic speeches, remember that the true corridors of power sometimes reeked of human waste, and that the fate of kingdoms was decided not just in marble halls, but in small, smelly rooms where one man knelt behind another, cloth in hand. Because in the end, royal hygiene wasn't simply about lice or perfume or poisonous makeup. It was about power stripped to its most primal essence. And yet even the grim duties of the groom of the stool pale beside what came next, a war against soap itself, where cleanliness became heresy and the Spanish Inquisition turned bathing into a crime punishable by death. And that's where our journey through the darkest royal secrets heads next. Step into the flickering candlelight of 15th century Spain and prepare to see royal hygiene spiral into one of the darkest, most psychologically disturbing chapters in all of disgusting history. Because while lice swarmed royal wigs and grooms of the stool wiped royal backsides, an even more insidious nightmare was taking shape, a war against soap itself. Imagine a world where washing your face could get you burned alive, where the scent of clean skin was enough to condemn you as a heretic. This is the Spanish Inquisition against soap, a twisted collision of religion, politics, and royal court secrets, so chilling it belongs on every viral video titled Shocking Secrets of Royalty or History's Darkest Scandals. It all begins with Queen Isabella of Castile, the same powerful monarch who financed Columbus and whose name echoes through the corridors of history. But behind the royal portraits and tales of conquest lies a ruler whose court believed that bathing was a dangerous, sinful indulgence. In their eyes, medieval hygiene wasn't merely a matter of health, it was a battleground for the soul. Priests preached from gilded pulpits that water was seductive, that the act of cleansing one's flesh invited vanity, lust, and the temptation of sin. In sermons, they compared the suffering filth of an unwashed body to Christ's agony on the cross, turning personal stench into a perverse badge of piety. To suffer through filth, they claimed, was to purify the soul. And so under Isabella's rule, soap became not just suspect, but practically satanic. Picture living in 15th century Granada. One year you're part of a thriving Muslim community where daily ablutions are essential acts of faith tied to cleanliness and spiritual devotion. The next year your city falls to the Spanish crown. Suddenly your morning wash is forbidden. The very rituals that once connected you to God become evidence of heresy. The Spanish Inquisition began prowling the streets, not just for hidden Korans, but for water usage. Clean clothes, the faint scent of soap, or even suspiciously shiny skin could become grounds for torture and execution. Neighbors informed on neighbors. Children were coached to watch whether their parents washed too often. The paranoia was all-consuming as royal hygiene mutated into a weapon of oppression. And here's the horror that makes this one of the ultimate secrets of royalty and a perfect subject for viral YouTube history channels. The Inquisition didn't just target individuals, it aimed to obliterate entire cultures. After conquering Granada, the Spanish monarchy systematically destroyed the public baths, fountains, and aqueducts that had made Islamic Spain one of the cleanest and healthiest regions in Europe. Bathhouses were either demolished or converted into Christian churches. Priests stood vigil over water usage. The mere existence of soap in your home could trigger arrest. Cleanliness itself was declared proof of secret Islamic belief, a religious crime punishable by burning alive. Imagine the psychological torment. You've been taught since birth that water purifies the soul and body. Now to stay alive, you must embrace filth. You feel lice crawling through your hair, smell the stink of sweat clinging to your clothes, yet you dare not wash. Your skin itches, wounds fester, and disease spreads. But washing might mean death at the stake. That's not just a historical detail, it's a human tragedy. So gripping it demands the modern viewer's attention, fueling millions of views under titles like Hidden Horrors of the Spanish Inquisition or When Soap Was a Death Sentence. And the consequences rippled far beyond Spain. Isabella's brutal war against soap traveled across oceans with Spanish conquistadors. When Christopher Columbus described how the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean bathed daily, Isabella was horrified. She ordered the suppression of native bathing rituals, branding them pagan and corrupt. In the name of Christian purity, the Spanish systematically destroyed the hygiene infrastructure of entire civilizations. Aqueducts fell into ruin. Public baths were banned. The native populations who had maintained excellent health through meticulous hygiene were suddenly condemned to European filth. This wasn't just cultural destruction. It became a biological catastrophe. Diseases like typhus, dysentery, and smallpox exploded, wiping out indigenous communities who were forbidden to practice the very hygiene that once protected them. The most chilling part is how cleanliness became a racial marker. Spanish royal court records began tracking not only blood purity, but bathing habits. Families whose ancestors had washed too frequently were marked as potential crypto-Muslims or Jews. Clean skin became as suspicious as foreign blood. Royal hygiene was no longer a personal choice, it was a political death trap. Under the weight of this paranoia, people deliberately allowed dirt and lice to accumulate, wearing filth as camouflage to blend into the new Christian order. It's an utterly grotesque twist, turning dirt into virtue and soap into a symbol of rebellion. And yet, amid the terror and disease, the Spanish courts maintained their dazzling surface. Queens and noble ladies continued to drape themselves in embroidered gowns sparkling with jewels while stinking of unwashed bodies and rotting breath beneath clouds of overpowering perfume. Visitors from other European courts recoiled from the stench, writing letters home describing Spain as beautiful but intolerable, a gilded kingdom suffocating under its own moral filth. It's this staggering hypocrisy that makes secrets of royalty so magnetic for modern audiences. Because beneath every glorious painting of Isabella lies the stink of her court's refusal to wash. So the next time you marvel at portraits of Spanish royalty in glittering crowns and immaculate robes, remember that these were men and women who deliberately chose to live in filth, who declared soap a tool of the devil, and who enforced a reign of terror over something as simple and as human as the desire to be clean. Because in the twisted logic of the Spanish Inquisition, filth was faith and water was treason. And yet, as horrifying as this war on soap was, it pales beside the cruelty of a single noble woman's so-called charity, a woman who soaked her diseased body in milk, then gifted that same toxic liquid to the starving poor. And that chilling tale is where our journey through royal hygiene's darkest secrets takes us next. Now brace yourself for perhaps the most twisted, jaw-dropping chapter in the saga of royal hygiene, a scandal so grotesque that it makes lice infestations and anti-soap inquisitions seem almost quaint by comparison. Because while kings and queens battled parasites and religious paranoia, one noble woman took her personal filth and turned it into a deadly act of so-called charity. This is the horrifying true story of Countess Platen of Hanover, whose beauty rituals weren't merely vain or eccentric, but a direct biological threat to anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. And it's the kind of scandal that explodes across viral YouTube videos under titles like "The Darkest Secrets of Royalty," or "When Royal Beauty Killed the Poor," because it fuses disgusting history cruelty and royal court secrets into a single nightmare that defies belief. Imagine the scene. Countess Platen, a high-born noblewoman wrapped in silks and pearls, lies half-submerged in a massive wooden tub, not filled with scented oils or rose petals, but with warm, frothy milk. At first glance, it might sound luxurious, even glamorous, a royal hygiene ritual worthy of medieval beauty secrets. But peel back the velvet curtain and you discover the horrifying truth. The Countess wasn't indulging in an extravagant spa treatment. She was desperately trying to soothe her skin ravaged by advanced venereal disease, almost certainly syphilis that was literally eating away at her flesh. Historical records hint at a distressing malady, a polite euphemism masking the reality of ulcerated sores, collapsing nasal bridges, and a stench of rotting tissue that no amount of perfume could disguise. Picture the milk swirling around her infected skin, turning from pure white to a thin, cloudy soup laced with blood pus and flakes of decaying flesh. Imagine the sickly, sweet smell of warm milk mixing with the fetid scent of infection, a scent so foul it could gag even the most hardened servants. And yet the Countess believed that soaking in milk could halt the relentless burning pain that crawled under her skin like fire ants. It was a desperate measure rooted in medieval misconceptions about beauty and health, a time when nobles believed milk could restore youth, soothe diseases, and cleanse the spirit. But in reality, her bath was nothing less than a biological weapon waiting to be unleashed on the unsuspecting poor. Because here comes the detail that cements this story as one of the most shocking secrets of royalty in all of disgusting history. After finishing her milk baths, Countess Platen didn't simply drain the tainted liquid away. No, she donated it to the poor. Let that sink in. A woman riddled with infectious disease whose body was shedding pathogens into the bathwater gave that same contaminated milk to starving peasants as an act of charity. Imagine being a desperate, impoverished family during a harsh European winter, barely surviving on scraps, when suddenly a servant arrives at your door carrying a precious gift from the Countess, several jugs of rich, creamy milk. You might believe your prayers had been answered, that this miracle gift could nourish your children and stave off starvation. But instead, that milk carried invisible death, because floating in every ladleful were microscopic pathogens from the Countess's diseased flesh. Parents spooned the Countess's bathwater into their children's mouths, never knowing they were feeding them liquid infected with venereal disease. Think about the psychological whiplash receiving a blessing from a noblewoman who claimed to be performing an act of Christian charity only to have your family ravaged by a horrific illness weeks later. This wasn't just careless generosity, it was an unintentional act of biological warfare that turned one woman's beauty ritual into a silent, creeping genocide among the lower classes. And the Countess herself likely never realized the full horror of what she was doing. Driven by a warped sense of religious duty and a belief in her own nobility, she genuinely thought she was sharing her abundance with the less fortunate. Her mind, clouded by the neurological ravages of advanced syphilis, could no longer comprehend that her charity was a death sentence. In her own diseased logic, the act was virtuous, a noble lady sharing what she no longer needed. But the reality was that she spread pain, sickness, and death under the guise of generosity. This story isn't an isolated aberration, it's part of a wider truth about secrets of royalty, that the same people who wielded unimaginable power often operated in a realm of such profound ignorance and narcissism that they became unwitting agents of mass suffering. The royal courts of Europe overflowed with similar horrors. Noble kitchens staffed by cooks infected with deadly diseases, used garments passed down to servants despite being crawling with parasites, and even communion cups shared by clergy afflicted with festering sores. The palaces were biological time bombs, each act of generosity or religious devotion hiding lethal consequences. And what makes Countess Platen's story perfect for viral YouTube history content is the visceral imagery, the the milk swirling pink with blood and pus, the screaming contradiction between royal luxury and fatal contamination, and the heartbreaking innocence of poor families who thought they were blessed. It's a narrative so shocking, so steeped in the hidden horrors of royal hygiene that it forces viewers to confront the dark underbelly of history. So the next time you see a portrait of a noble lady lounging in a milk bath, remember that behind those serene smiles might lie ulcerated flesh, contagious disease, and the cold reality that royal charity could sometimes kill more efficiently than any sword. Because in the cruel theater of secrets of royalty, the line between beauty ritual and biological disaster was paper thin. And if you think milk baths were the pinnacle of horror, wait until you see what was crawling and dying inside the towering hairstyles of Europe's queens and noblewomen. Because next, we dive into a story so revolting it makes the Countess's milk bath look almost benign, the royal hair horrors where beauty became a rotting, living ecosystem of parasites and filth. If you think you've heard the worst that royal hygiene has to offer, brace yourself, because nothing, and I mean nothing, plunges you into the depths of disgusting history quite like the horrors lurking atop the heads of queens and noblewomen across medieval and Renaissance Europe. This is the chapter of Secrets of Royalty where elegance transforms into a living nightmare, where towering hairstyles became grotesque ecosystems teeming with parasites, filth, and even rotting flesh. Welcome to the hair horror. A tale so revolting, so biologically insane, it's tailor-made for viral YouTube videos with titles like The Royal Hairstyles That Could Kill You, or Beauty Secrets That Turned Into Biological Disasters. Picture the court of Louis XVI or Elizabeth I glittering under chandeliers, silk gowns, swishing over marble floors, powdered wigs towering skyward like ivory monuments. These weren't mere fashion statements, they were public declarations of wealth, status, and power. But peel back the curls and powder and you'd discover a seething underworld where lice, fleas, and even more unspeakable creatures found refuge in the royal coiffure. Royal hygiene was no match for these monstrous creations. The very hairstyles that crowned Europe's most powerful women were in truth a hidden chamber of filth, decay, and living torment. Let's start with the foundation of these towering hairdos: animal fat. Yes, animal fat. Noblewomen slathered bear grease or ox fat onto their natural hair and wigs to sculpt those elaborate shapes. But grease wasn't just for style, it acted like a sticky glue, keeping hair pieces together and allowing powdered dyes to adhere. The problem: grease is the perfect buffet for parasites. Imagine your scalp coated in a thick, rancid layer of animal fat, warming under candles in crowded ballrooms, releasing waves of putrid odor that no perfume could fully suppress. Fleas and lice flocked to this greasy wonderland, burrowing and laying eggs and multiplying in an endless carnival of crawling horror. And here's the revolting twist that makes this story rocket into viral territory. Those hairstyles were often left in place for weeks, sometimes even months at a time. Royal hygiene did not include regular washing. Instead, women endured their own hair, becoming a breeding ground for insects, bacteria, and mold. Picture entire colonies of lice nesting inside powdered towers, moving in synchronized waves whenever the queen turned her head. Dead insects and parasite droppings mixed with powder sweat and grease, forming thick crusts that hardened into disgusting helmets no comb could penetrate. The smell historians record was unearthly, a pungent stew of rotting fat, human sweat, and the sour tang of decaying flesh. Imagine standing next to a queen in court. She's a vision of regal splendor in diamonds and silks. Yet as she leans closer to speak, you catch a whiff so vile it makes your eyes water, a blend of rancid animal fat, decaying skin, and the metallic scent of blood from scratched sores. Because underneath the powdered perfection, these women's scalps were a battlefield. Many queens developed open sores and skin infections from scratching at lice bites or from the sheer weight of their wigs. Historians note cases where pieces of scalp came away with the hairpiece when it was finally removed. Think about that, a queen's scalp literally peeling off because her beauty standards demanded towering hair constructions weighing several pounds. That's not just a historical footnote. It's prime content for viral history channels obsessed with secrets of royalty. And if you're wondering how they manage the incessant itching, here's another detail perfect for YouTube thumbnails: the scratching sticks. Noble women carried elegant, jewel-encrusted sticks, long, thin rods tipped with tiny claws or spoons. These were custom-designed tools for navigating deep into the towering labyrinths of their hair to reach the skin beneath. Picture a royal court filled with women discreetly plunging silver sticks into their hair, twisting and scraping in desperate attempts to relieve the crawling agony without ruining the sculpted masterpiece perched on their heads. It's a detail both grotesque and darkly comedic, a perfect intersection of royal elegance and biological nightmare. But there's an even darker layer to this horror. Fleas, lice, and mites were only the beginning. Over weeks of neglect, hairpieces could begin to rot, developing fungal growths and attracting larger pests like beetles. Some accounts describe mice finding shelter in these monstrous wigs, nesting among curls and padding. Although historians debate whether this was an everyday occurrence or exaggerated gossip, even the possibility that rodents lived in a queen's hair reveals just how shockingly far royal hygiene could fall. It's precisely this mixture of factual horror and legendary rumor that fuels viral videos under titles like "The Royal Hairstyles That Became Mouse Hotels." And let's not forget the social terror behind it all. These elaborate hair structures weren't optional. Courtly fashion dictated that a woman's social standing was measured partly by how tall, complex, and ostentatious her hair was. To show up with a modest style risked social exile. So noble women endured weeks of crawling torment and rotting hair rather than lose their place in royal society. The psychological toll must have been staggering. Imagine balancing political intrigue, diplomatic duties, and personal dignity, all while a hidden swarm of lice devoured your scalp. And the stench wasn't confined to individual wigs. It seeped into the court atmosphere itself, mingling with layers of perfume and candle smoke. Visitors from less decadent courts recoiled from the overpowering smell, describing royal gatherings as stunning to the eye but nearly impossible to endure for the nose. It's a detail that rips away the glossy surface of history and shows how secrets of royalty often reeked literally of human suffering and decay. So next time you admire a portrait of Marie Antoinette with a towering powdered hairstyle, remember this. Beneath that mountain of curls might have crawled a civilization of parasites, each wave of powdered beauty hiding sores, blood, and unspeakable filth. That's the true legacy of royal hygiene, a legacy so revolting it keeps audiences glued to viral videos and horrified storytelling. And yet all of this was just the prelude to perhaps the most mind-boggling royal hygiene disaster of all, a catastrophe on such a monumental scale that it turned the world's most opulent palace into a gilded cesspool. Because next we're going inside Versailles itself, where 10,000 nobles and servants lived together in a golden prison of unimaginable filth. And trust me, you're not prepared for what lay behind those mirrored walls. Step through the mirrored doors of Versailles and prepare to watch your fairy tale fantasies shatter into 1,000 shards of gilded glass. Because if you thought lice-infested wigs and toxic lead face paint were the pinnacle of royal hygiene horror, think again. Versailles was the ultimate catastrophe, a palace so magnificent it dazzled the eyes, yet so foul it nearly blinded the senses. This wasn't just a building, it was a gilded cesspool, a seething monument to secrets of royalty that modern viewers devour in viral YouTube videos titled "Disgusting Truths About Versailles" or "The Palace That Stank to High Heaven." Beneath its glittering chandeliers and silk-lined halls, Versailles was drowning quite literally in human waste, unwashed bodies, and a stench so powerful it could stagger ambassadors and send servants reeling. Imagine the scene, the hall of mirrors ablaze with candlelight reflecting endless images of powdered wigs, jewel-encrusted gowns, and men in embroidered velvet. Every inch screamed opulence. Yet hidden beneath this dazzling illusion lurked a reality so vile it makes modern sewage plants look like botanical gardens. Because at the height of Louis XIV's reign, more than 10,000 people, royals, aristocrats, courtiers, servants, guards, were crammed into Versailles like rats in a jeweled maze. Royal hygiene was an afterthought, crushed beneath the weight of royal court protocol and spectacle. Toilets were scarce, plumbing practically non-existent. So where did all that human waste go? The answer is simple and revolting everywhere. Picture women lifting their massive gowns and urinating where they stood during long court ceremonies because the nearest chamber pot was hundreds of feet away. Imagine men drunkenly pissing off balconies into the courtyards below, not caring who might be passing beneath. There were no discreet sanitation workers in powdered wigs. Instead, waste soaked into the priceless carpets dripped from the upper balconies and pooled in the marble corridors. The smell was unimaginable, a festering cocktail of ammonia feces, rotting food sweat, and blood from infected wounds hidden beneath silk and lace. Historians describe the palace air as so thick with stench, it seemed to have physical weight. Even the layers of ambergris, rose oil, and civet musk sprayed by desperate courtiers couldn't mask the foulness for long. And here's the detail that launches this story into viral territory: the practice of tossing chamber pots out of windows. Yes, even at Versailles, the palace of the Sun King, human waste was hurled into the gardens below, sometimes landing on unlucky nobles' visitors, or even the queen herself. Records tell of Marie Antoinette being splashed with excrement while crossing an interior courtyard, a single moment that obliterates every delicate powdered image painted by romantic period dramas. Imagine the Queen of France draped in silks worth more than entire villages, standing frozen as human filth rains down upon her. That's the true Versailles, a palace so clogged with human waste that it was quite literally bursting at the seams. And the infrastructure simply couldn't cope. Latrines overflowed, pipes clogged, and waste backed up into kitchens, bedrooms, and grand reception halls. Imagine feasting on roasted pheasant in the king's private dining room, while sewage seeped through the ceiling above, dripping into your goblet of Bordeaux. It's a detail so grotesque that it fuels millions of views on channels specializing in disgusting history and secrets of royalty. Because it reveals the ultimate hypocrisy, the palace designed as the symbol of European civilization was in truth a festering biological disaster. But the catastrophe wasn't merely physical, it was psychological. Court life revolved around elaborate etiquette and appearances. Nobles obsessed over posture, fashion, and perfectly executed bows, even while gagging on the smell of human waste wafting through gilded halls. Visitors from other nations recoiled in horror, writing letters home, describing Versailles as both breathtaking and unbearable. Some foreign ambassadors reported headaches, nausea, and fainting spells from the oppressive stink. Yet the French court refused to acknowledge the filth. Admitting that Versailles was a sewer would have shattered the Sun King's carefully curated image of divine splendor. So the court kept dancing, feasting, and scheming in a golden prison of decay. And think of the children, the future kings and queens, who learned to walk while dodging puddles of urine in palace corridors. Imagine growing up believing that the reeking stench of thousands of unwashed bodies was normal, that holding your breath was simply part of royal etiquette. For the nobles of Versailles, the horror became routine. They developed secret codes for warning each other about fresh deposits of waste, learned how to stand upwind during ceremonies, and carried perfumed handkerchiefs like weapons. They became experts at navigating a palace where every footstep might splash into something unspeakable. And perhaps the most tragic part is how Versailles became a model for other royal courts. Monarchs from across Europe visited, dazzled by the Sun King's brilliance, then returned home determined to recreate his palace of filth. Versailles didn't just spread fashion, it spread a sanitation disaster across the continent. Royal hygiene reached new lows as palaces everywhere tried to outdo each other in splendor while ignoring the stinking biological reality simmering under the marble floors. So the next time you see films showing Versailles as a place of elegance and romance, remember this: the Sun King's greatest creation was also one of history's greatest cesspools. It wasn't just silk and diamonds, it was sewage disease and a daily battle to survive the relentless stench. That's the brutal hidden truth behind Secrets of Royalty, a truth so shocking it will forever feed viral curiosity on YouTube. And yet, as vile as Versailles was, it's crucial to remember that the true horror of royal hygiene wasn't confined to palaces. Because behind all the gilded doors and flowing silks, there were real human beings trapped in living nightmares of filth, poison, and suffering. And as we step back to look at all these grotesque details, it becomes painfully clear that the story of royal hygiene is not just about dirty people in pretty clothes, but about human beings fighting to maintain dignity while their bodies betrayed them day after day, year after year. And that, my friends, leads us straight into the final reckoning of these forgotten queens and noblemen, a reckoning that will change the way you see history forever. Now that we've peeled back the velvet curtains and crawled through the stinking corridors of royal palaces, there's one final truth you need to face, a reckoning that transforms all these filthy, fascinating facts into something far deeper and infinitely more tragic. Because the story of royal hygiene isn't just about lice, sewage, and lead-poisoned queens. It's about human beings trapped in golden prisons, forced to play out a grotesque theater of beauty, power, and survival, while their own bodies turned into battlegrounds of disease and decay. And that's why Secrets of Royalty continue to captivate millions on YouTube and social media. They force us to confront how even the most powerful people in history were ultimately prisoners of flesh, blood, and filth. Imagine standing in the echoing marble halls of Versailles, silk rustling at your ankles, diamonds winking in candlelight, knowing that behind every powdered face was a mind trembling with fear. Fear that one scratch might reveal lice. Fear that a single fainting spell could betray lead poisoning. Fear that the faintest whiff of bad breath might brand you as diseased and unworthy of court. Everyday queens and courtiers donned their masks, powdered, perfumed, and perfect, while silently enduring a private hell that modern audiences can barely comprehend. They ruled empires while battling migraines from rotting wigs, while vomiting from the stink of sewage, while quietly going mad from the toxins seeping into their bloodstreams. It wasn't merely disgusting history. It was a psychological horror story, written in secret diaries, whispered behind gloved hands, and buried under centuries of romantic propaganda. And it's precisely this collision of elegance and suffering that makes royal hygiene the ultimate viral topic, because it tears away the fantasy that kings and queens were gods among men. Instead, it reveals how absolute power often meant absolute vulnerability. Picture Elizabeth Thorne standing on her throne, draped in golden brocade, issuing commands that shaped the future of nations, all while trying not to flinch as flakes of lead paint fell from her face like snow. Or Louis XIV performing elaborate court rituals while the floor beneath his feet squelched with urine soaking through priceless carpets. These weren't just rulers. They were human beings forced to perform divinity in public while enduring physical torment in private. The price they paid was staggering. Lead poisoning didn't just destroy skin and teeth, it shredded nerves, clouded memory, and triggered paranoia that destroyed relationships and destabilized kingdoms. Lice infestations didn't just cause itching, they seeded entire epidemics of typhus, transforming courts into death traps. The refusal to bathe, driven by twisted religious doctrine, didn't merely result in bad smells. It collapsed entire cultures, spreading disease across continents and wiping out civilizations that had once flourished in cleanliness and health. And every layer of perfume wasn't just masking body odor, it was burying the truth, suffocating any honest acknowledgement of the biological catastrophe brewing beneath royal splendor. Think about the psychological toll. Imagine trying to maintain regal composure while your scalp crawled with parasites, while your gums bled from rotting teeth, while the stench of human waste rolled through the hall like a physical assault. Imagine having to remember dozens of diplomatic protocols and foreign titles while your own brain fogged with heavy metal poisoning. Secrets of Royalty weren't just hidden scandals. They were daily tortures endured in silence under the crushing weight of expectation and tradition. And the saddest part, many of these women and men knew exactly how bad it was. Letters and diaries survive where queens confess their disgust, their exhaustion, their desperate yearning to be free of wigs, powders, and false perfumes. But court culture was a cage stronger than iron. To admit vulnerability meant risking everything: status, security, even life itself. And let's not forget the ripple effect. Royal hygiene disasters didn't stay confined to palaces. They spilled outward into society, infecting armies, decimating cities, and shaping history. Lead-induced rages altered diplomatic negotiations. Typhus outbreaks reshuffled the balance of power in Europe. Filth-driven epidemics cleared the way for revolutions as common people realized their divine rulers were just as human and just as filthy as anyone else. The secrets of royalty were the secrets of humanity itself, that behind every crown and scepter beats a heart terrified of decay, disease, and death. And that's why disgusting history will always remain one of the most magnetic topics for viral storytelling. Because it's not just gross, it's profoundly human. So the next time you find yourself marveling at portraits of silk-clad monarchs, remember this. Those smooth faces and regal poses were painted over blistering sores, festering wounds, and minds half-mad from poison and parasites. Those glittering palaces were echo chambers of stench and despair. And those men and women who smiled serenely from gilded frames were fighting battles against their own flesh every single day. That's the real cost of royal hygiene. Not just the lice, not just the filth, but the crushing psychological torment of living a lie, of pretending to be divine while rotting alive. And while the queens and kings eventually found relief in death, the myths about them lived on, sanitized for history books, cleansed of their filth, preserved only as symbols of beauty and power. But here, in these dark corridors of hidden history, we resurrect the truth. Because the story of royal hygiene isn't merely disgusting, it's a testament to human endurance, vanity, and the price we pay for illusions. And yet, even as we reach the end of this twisted tale, one question still hangs heavy in the perfumed air. What other horrors of the past are we still choosing not to see? Because secrets of royalty are just one part of the monstrous tapestry of human history waiting to be unearthed, and the next chapter might be even darker than the last. So here we stand together on the other side of velvet curtains ripped open, peering into the darkest corners of royal hygiene, where secrets of royalty dissolve into something far more human and infinitely more horrifying. We've waded through rivers of urine on Versailles' marble floors. We've watched queens transform into walking monuments of poison under thick crusts of lead paint. We've felt the relentless crawling of lice inside powdered wigs, smelled the rancid fumes of animal fat melting atop infected scalps, and witnessed the unthinkable cruelty of a countess soaking her diseased flesh in milk only to gift that contaminated liquid to the starving poor. And after crawling through all these palaces of filth, one truth looms larger than any jeweled crown. Royal hygiene wasn't simply a matter of filth. It was a theater of human suffering, vanity fear, and desperate survival. And that's why secrets of royalty remain the ultimate viral goldmine on YouTube, because they obliterate the fairy tales and remind us that behind every throne beats the fragile, terrified heart of a human being. Imagine once more the glittering halls of Versailles, ablaze with thousands of candles. Every flicker reflects off diamonds, gold-threaded gowns, and the polished steel of swords worn by noblemen who commanded entire armies. And yet amid this splendor, the air trembles with a scent so vile it could drop a man to his knees. The rustle of silk hides the scratching of lice-infested scalps. Perfume clouds the scent of rotting flesh. And in the background, the muffled splash of waste hitting marble floors echoes through corridors meant for kings. This is not the sanitized history taught in classrooms. This is the hidden history, the disgusting history that pulses beneath the facade of royal power. And it's exactly the kind of revelation that makes audiences keep watching, sharing, and subscribing. Because it transforms the royal figures we thought we knew into vulnerable, suffering souls whose reality was far more monstrous than any fiction. And let's talk about why this story matters not just as entertainment, but as a mirror, reflecting our own time. Because royal hygiene wasn't only about dirt, it was about control. It was about the weight of appearances, about how far human beings will go to protect an illusion, even as their own flesh rots away. It's a cautionary tale that echoes into the modern age, where social media filters and celebrity perfection hide private torments and insecurities no less devastating than those endured by Elizabeth II or Marie Antoinette. The viral appeal of disgusting history lies not only in the shock value but in its ruthless honesty. It shows that behind every facade, be it a royal crown or an Instagram feed, there's a human being terrified of being exposed. And it's precisely this collision of beauty and horror that makes Secrets of Royalty the perfect viral cocktail for YouTube's algorithm. Because it's not just trivia, it's a roller coaster of fascination, revulsion, empathy, and sheer disbelief. You can't look away because every detail slices through centuries of myth-making. You want to know more because each layer peels back another truth uglier and more human than the last. Viewers crave this content because it answers a forbidden question: what happens when those at the very top of society are revealed to be just as mortal, just as dirty, and just as vulnerable as everyone else? So if you've made it this far through our journey of lead-painted faces, lice-infested wigs, urine-soaked palaces, and milk-bathed nightmares, ask yourself, what else don't we know about the people who ruled the world? What other chapters of hidden history lie festering in dusty archives waiting to explode onto screens and shatter illusions? Because the deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes that history isn't merely about kings, queens, dates, and battles. It's about blood, sweat, terror, and filth. It's about the price people pay for power and the price others pay for believing the lie that royalty was somehow better, purer, or cleaner than the rest of humanity. And that, my friends, is why these stories deserve to go viral. Not because they're grotesque, although they are, but because they pull back the curtain on what it means to be human in a world obsessed with appearances. They remind us that the fairy tales we grew up with are just that, tales. And that sometimes the truth is far more shocking, more tragic, and infinitely more fascinating than anything we could invent. So if you've been fascinated or horrified by these tales of royal hygiene, make sure you hit that like button so YouTube knows you're hungry for more disgusting history. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring the secrets of royalty that textbooks left out, because I promise you there are still darker, stranger chapters waiting to be told. And tell me in the comments which royal horror shocked you the most. Which one left you reeling, and which one do you want to dive deeper into next? Because this journey into the monstrous realities of the past is far from over. We've only scratched the surface. And together, we're going to keep digging one horrifying secret at a time. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, behind every crown lies a story of filth, fear, and the kind of human suffering you'll never see in a royal portrait. And speaking of portraits, in our next video, we're peeling back the gilded paint on another royal scandal so jaw-dropping, so drenched in blood and betrayal, that it might just redefine everything you thought you knew about power. Don't miss it. And so here we are, standing together at the edge of history's darkest corridors, blinking into the light after crawling through centuries of filth, secrets, and silent suffering. We've peeled back the powdered faces, cracked open the gilded doors, and discovered that royalty, the people we were taught to revere as nearly divine, were human beings trapped in prisons of beauty, ceremony, and unimaginable physical torment. The real truth behind royal hygiene isn't simply that it was disgusting. It's that it exposed how deeply humans will sacrifice health, comfort, and even sanity to maintain an illusion. And that's the punchline that hits hardest of all. The fairy tale was never about royalty being perfect. It was about us needing to believe they were. Because if kings and queens cloaked in silk and diamonds were rotting from the inside out, then maybe none of us are immune to the darkness beneath appearances. And maybe the very discomfort you feel right now, the crawling on your skin, the recoil in your stomach, that's the sign you're awake. That you're seeing the world more clearly than you ever have before. And that's a victory. Because knowing the truth is always better than living in a lie, even when that truth reeks of rancid fat and human waste. So here's what I want you to do right now. If this journey shocked you, fascinated you, or even made you a little queasy, hit like so we keep unearthing these hidden horrors together. Comment below and tell me which royal secret blew your mind the most. Was it the lice crawling through mile-high wigs, the lead paint cracking off royal faces, or the sewage rivers running through Versailles? Your thoughts might spark the next chapter we dig into. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and tap the bell icon, because the secrets of royalty are endless, and I promise there are darker, stranger stories waiting just beyond the next gilded door. Save this video if you ever need a reminder that behind every crown is a story of fear, filth, and fragile humanity. Stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the truth may be ugly, but it's always worth it.